Welcome to another episode of our podcast, Decoding Gaming Law. I'm your host, Franklin, and today on our episode we have Claudio Caruana, a C-level experienced in-house legal and compliance gaming professional for 15 years. Currently, he's the General Counsel at GiG. GiG is a company that provides sportsbook and platform solutions to operators across 29 regulated markets. Claudio, thank you very much for coming here. We've been knowing each other for quite some time now, since university and other, we worked in similar environments. I think you were one of the first lawyers who sort of took ownership of gaming applications here in Malta with the MGA as well. And then also in 2018, the overhaul of the regulation, you were quite at the forefront of that. So I'm going to jump immediately into our first question. If we look at the last 12 months, what would you say has been the most significant regulatory development?
So, Franklin, thank you for having me. A real pleasure to be here today. So look, if we look at the last 12 months, I think one of the most highly anticipated regulatory developments of this industry is the regulation of online betting and online casino in Brazil. It is really no surprise that Brazil was highly anticipated by many in this industry, purely because even in the absence of regulation in Brazil, statistics show that Brazil accounted for more than 20% of all online gambling traffic. So besides that, you've got the fact that Brazil is a populous country, more than 200 million people, with a growing middle class, with pretty good internet penetration rates, and what's more important is that you've got a sports-obsessed nation. There are, figures that show that more than 86% of sports fans have actually placed a bet in their life previously. So obviously it is no surprise that the, lifting of the prohibition for online casino and online betting in Brazil is a really momentous occasion for this industry. Having said that, obviously not everyone is celebrating. As we have said, prior to regulation, gambling was already rife in Brazil, so there were many participants in that market already. Some of these participants have been left out in the cold, mainly as a consequence of the fact that the license ticket price is roughly 5 million euros.
Okay.
And there's also a bonus ban. So that bonus ban is particularly also painful for affiliates. Although having said that, it is still a big business, really big opportunity, and many are watching Brazil to see how things sort of unravel from here on.
What's interesting about you and GiG as well, that you operate sort of in 29 regulated markets. That gives you, I think, apart from a lot of responsibility, but also a massive insight on what's happening in the world. Do you think Brazil sort of, compared to all these jurisdictions, it's the most highly anticipated ever, or is it just this year?
No, I think, well, it is a big market, right? But one has to also understand the socio-demographic aspects of a country. So it's a large country. There's lots of people there. Many people are, like we said, sports fans, and many people like to place bets. But certainly one has to see then the affluency of the population and how much they will put into into entertainment and gambling. So I think the jury is out at the moment, and it will take some time for us to know what really the size of this opportunity is in Brazil. However, the signals are very good at the moment, and it seems like Brazil will be big business for many operators.
Very interesting, and also I think also the UAE as well. It's opening up its doors, especially Abu Dhabi, new licensing regime. So we're seeing a lot of change going on all around the world for countries where before gaming has been prohibited, but now, for example, UAE with the free zones and everything, you can sort of obtain license and operate there freely across the globe. So it's interesting how jurisdictions are opening up. And that leads us to the next question. When a country decides to regulate, what is usually the catalyst for change? Why?
Yeah, I mean, usually it is quite simple, and it mainly boils down to two things. So if you've got a market which is already rife with gaming activity, as Brazil is, for example, in essence, the government wants a slice of that cake. If it already exists, it's not being taxed, then all you have to do is regulate it so that you can tax it. The second reason is also, as a government, you have a duty of care towards your population. If you've got your players who are playing on sites which are not regulated, who are not subject to your regulatory supervision and oversight, then potentially players could be playing with operators that are unscrupulous, operators that are not protecting players' deposits, or they're not guaranteeing players' wins, or there's the complete absence of safer gambling controls. So certainly, I mean, that is another consideration which usually leads to governments ultimately then, ditching their fight against illegal gambling and deciding that the right thing to do is to regulate it.
Exactly.
I think post-COVID, we're seeing more of these sort of trends and decisions being taken by governments, because obviously they're trying to balance the books after heavy deficits that they've incurred.
Exactly. So it's not just a fiscal advantage, it's also a social positive obligation of the country to regulate and minimize any unregulated activities such as gaming. Our next question: with online gambling being so accessible, how does a jurisdiction ensure that their residents are only participating on licensed casinos?
So this is the big question of our industry, and it relates to the raging debate about the rate of channelization. Channelization basically meaning the proportion of gaming activity which is directed towards the regulated and the licensed platforms. The rate of channelization is basically a reflection of the regulatory regime that is introduced by the government. It is also a reflection of the enforcement measures and the tools at the disposal of the regulator to curtail the black market. So in my view, having a high rate of channelization is not only a target, should not only be a target, but it should be a duty of a regulator, an obligation of a regulator towards the market participants, towards the operators that are seeking licenses from that regulator, because in essence these operators are the ones who are paying license fees. They're the ones paying regulatory taxes.
Okay.
They are the ones also who are bearing the hefty price, basically, have the burden of complying with regulations. Typically, we see that governments set a target of around 90% channelization rate. I mean, ultimately, the goal should always be to have 100% channelization rate, but that's simply not realistic, because you're always going to have those, consumers, let's say, in the market, and those operators that might, that will still, for whatever reason, be participating on the black market.
So the key takeaway in this is the rate of channelization. Very interesting. I never heard of it, to be honest with you. So it's good to know. But if there is a safe, regulated environment on which players can play, why would anyone risk depositing their money with illegal operators?
Right. So this is exactly the quandary, and the fact that it happens, the fact that there is a safer, regulated environment. There's a place where you can place your money with an operator who will protect your deposits, who is subject to oversight by a regulator. If you're winning, your win is going to be paid out. So if there's that safe environment, then it begs the question, why are players going to illegal operators which are not subject to the same regulatory supervision and oversight, and therefore it is not as safe for players to be putting their money in these wallets. But the fact that it happens requires us to dig deeper and to study why the black market exists. What are the motivations and the reasons for those players to move there? Is it because it is hard to distinguish between a regulated website and an illegal operator? Is it because there are very heavy advertising restrictions or advertising bans, whereby the regulated businesses are not in a position to even be prominent or, be heard of by the consumers?
And compliance obligations and all that.
That could be heavy, compliant play restrictions. There could be heavy, AML, KYC processes. It might also be the fact that the RTP on black market sites is higher than that with of legal operators, because ultimately black market sites do not have to pay taxes, and therefore they have larger margins to be playing around with. So I don't have the answer, and I don't think there's a one size fits all. But ultimately there needs to be a study. One has to carry out a bit of an impact assessment whenever one is regulating, in order to understand what are those measures, what are the right controls, and what is that regulatory regime that you need to create in order to ensure that most of the operators and at least 90% of the consumers in your market will be playing on the licensed channels.
And as you said before, sort of I think we all know it's no surprise that gaming is a highly lucrative industry, and it's sort of not only a fiscal advantage for the governments, but also a social responsibility, as we said. Would you say that active enforcement against illegal operators also helps to improve the channelization rate?
So, like I mentioned earlier, it is to improve the channelization rate, you need to have a well-crafted regulatory regime which creates the right conditions which will be conducive to improving that rate of channelization. Enforcement is certainly one of those ingredients in that recipe for success to improve your rate of channelization. But it is not the only one. If you have what you need to basically have is a regulatory regime which encourages both the operators and the players to want to participate in that market. So let's take a few examples.
Safeguarded market and safeguarded framework.
So let's take Germany as an example. I mean, Germany is a country whereby they've imposed significant restrictions on gambling. You've got things like €1 per spin. You've got a 5-second spin duration. There's no, you can't have jackpots. There's no autoplay. To top it all off, there's then gaming taxes which are imposed on the stakes as opposed to on the GGR, which obviously is the wrong tax base for our industry. It is no surprise that the channelization rate in Germany is particularly low.
Yeah.
Sweden's also not doing very great. I mean, the government and the regulator had stated that their target would have been 90% channelization rate, but they're actually about 20% short. Again, the reasoning there is that there is there are bonus restrictions beyond the welcome bonus, and then there's not much active enforcement. In Brazil, I mean, obviously it's too early days, but Brazil at the moment, the rate of channelization is around 65% after 1 month, basically, of the regulated market being launched. Obviously, 65% is low. However, Brazil does have the advantage that the most popular payment method within Brazil, which is basically known as Pix, is a payment method which is established by the central bank of the country.
Okay.
So they have a tight grip on it, and they have control over over the payment infrastructure there, and they can place further restrictions through payment methods that could then automatically drive more consumers to the regulated market.
So enhancing the safeguards, really and truly.
Enhancing the safeguards, but also making it more difficult for players to participate in illegal markets, because the offering on the illegal market is simply not as attractive as the regulated one. And this is why we're saying it has to be a balance. It has to be a balance between enforcement. It has to be, And besides enforcement, also that there are the conditions which are conducive to increase that rate of channelization by making sure that you're not killing the fun out of gaming. Because if you're killing the fun out of gaming, if you're imposing too heavy restrictions, too many spin durations, too many stake limits, deposit limits, too intrusive and invasive AML and RG sort of controls, then it is the players themselves at some point that will be fed up with all this, and they will themselves be looking for sites who don't have these controls. So don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't have these controls, but what I am saying is that it must be a balance. And often what we see is that governments, politicians in particular, let's say there are some governments which are formed by very fragile, very complicated coalitions. Coalition partners which might have an anti-gambling agenda. And sometimes you see politicians advancing legislation which is there to appease their coalition partners, as opposed to really achieve its true aim of trying to protect the final consumer.
Italy is a case in point as well.
Yeah, Italy is a case in point, especially with the advertising ban.
So moving on to the next question also, because time is running when you're having fun, as always. We've spoken about Brazil and the challenges the legal market presents to regulators. What else will 2025 bring, in your opinion?
Yeah, so like any other year in this industry, this year will be busier again. There's going to be a flurry of activity with several jurisdictions announcing that they are looking into regulation, some of them advancing bills in Parliament. We know that Finland, for example, has submitted legislation to the European Commission, and later on this year we should be getting a confirmation on when that market will be launching, most likely in the summer of next year. New Zealand is another pretty sizable gambling market, and there's a lot of discussion in the country that they will be also regulating in the upcoming years. Various other provinces in Canada will probably follow the example set by Ontario. They will also be possibly regulating, I think, starting with the province of Alberta. Very interestingly, France at the moment only regulates online betting, not casino. This is obviously a highly anticipated regulatory development. We know that the French government is discussing and has stated its intent to regulate online casino, but it's yet to materialize. So obviously that will be a really big opportunity for operators in this industry. Lastly, there's Ireland. Ireland has also communicated that they are establishing a gaming regulator, so one can also expect that in the years to come we'll also see the Republic of Ireland regulating online gaming.
Also, I would like to add the UAE as well. Last year in December I've been to Abu Dhabi and I met the actual authority, the ADGM, and they are very they have a really high appetite. They're hungry to license this industry, which of course goes slightly against their religion, tradition and all that. But I think they really want to, also in the crypto space as well, they really want to move with the times and open up to, at the end of the day, a very advantageous industry for all of the UAE.
Yeah, and look, in the UAE, most of the population, the vast majority of the population is actually expats. So people that do not follow the same religion and they do not have the same beliefs. So I think they are seizing on the opportunity that there's more expats than locals, and they are creating a regulatory regime which caters for the expats, creates a safe environment for them to play in, but at the same time taxing it, bringing in all the tax revenue, but at the same time they are still protecting our locals and protecting basically the beliefs.
So one final question. You've mentioned several jurisdictions that will regulate their local markets, that are traditionally markets which an MGA licensee would service. How does this affect the MGA license and the local economy?
Right, I mean, the value of the MGA license has, steadily declined over the years. We've seen that over the years. We've seen it with the regulation of the UK back in 2014, then Denmark, then Romania, then Sweden, now, Ontario.
The Netherlands as well.
The Netherlands, we've got Peru, now we've got Brazil. So all the grey markets, which were not typically the markets that an MGA licensee would typically target, are starting to disappear. Now, as we have mentioned, there's also quite a number of other jurisdictions that seem to be regulating in the coming years as well. And the more countries regulate, you're going to see a proportionate decline in the value of the MGA license. However, I don't think that this spells much bad news for Malta. I don't think this is catastrophic at all, because over the last few years, Malta has strategically shifted its focus from being a licensing hub to focusing more on Malta as a center of excellence, to Malta as a place where business is done amongst gambling operators and suppliers, where affiliates are. We've created this thing that we call the gaming ecosystem.
Exactly. We were the first ones, I think, to really regulate.
Yes, I think we were the first ones, and we still maintain pole position. I think Malta does still remain as the epicenter of all gaming activity. And in essence, Malta is now focusing more on what Malta has to offer.
Mm-hmm.
Malta basically is it's a safe country, stable economy, stable political system. There are very good tax advantages for both companies and also individuals that are working within this industry, thanks to the highly qualified persons rules. There's good networking opportunities. Things like Sigma happening.
Exactly.
In Malta and various other conferences. There's good investment in the digital infrastructure and in talent. So I think insofar as Malta keeps investing in education and in innovation, maintains excellence in regulation, and looks after the quality of life as well that we offer in this country, I think Malta has a fairly steady chance of maintaining that pole position as the world's leading iGaming jurisdiction.
I tend to agree with you. So that concludes our episode for today. Thank you very much once again for being here, Claudio, and I look forward to meeting you again in all the gaming conferences that we'll be attending this year.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.